breakdown of Rocky to ever get put on YouTube. Like a lot of the stuff that's in these notes, you can't find in the book or the movie. And Andy even shares some stuff with me that he's never really put down anywhere before. People find Rocky so endearing is he's kind of like a dog. A dog that's maybe a little bit smarter than you. I mean, he's got a fun personality that's easy to fall in love with, but it's also kind of like the personality of a dog. You know, he's friendly and he's helpful and sometimes just kind of silly, but he's also loyal and brave and empathetic. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a conversation with their dog and take them on adventures and solve science puzzles together?
Can I pet that dog?
No, he's
Can I pet that dog?
Their legs are joined at the thorax with a ball and socket joint like our shoulders, which allows them to reach in all directions, with a hinge joint like our knees and elbows halfway down. And they have 3 stony fingers on each hand that they can use both as hands and feet, so they can walk on them or they can manipulate objects with them. In fact, he describes them as pentadextrous, meaning they can use all 5 hands to do whatever. Though they usually stand on 3 feet while using 2 to grab and do things with. And because they're radially symmetrical, they have no front or back and can travel in any direction without needing to turn around or face a certain direction. They also don't need to face any certain direction to see because they have no eyes.
Since it's dark on the surface, there's no benefit to evolving vision, so nothing did. But they evolved extremely accurate echolocation. Then it just makes sense that they would use sound to communicate, right? And their sound, they don't have ears. Their skin, their rocky carapace, every part of their body can quote unquote hear, can detect sound vibrations, and their brain just assembles. Their brain deals with all that. And while we may think, "Wow, that's amazing," they would look at us and say, "Let me get this straight. You get electromagnetic radiation, bounces off stuff, and then it comes into these organs, and then." So then...
And you can only see in one direction?
It gets absorbed by some cells that just tell your brain about it, and then somehow you know everything about your environment based on that. Yeah. And your brain is actually just memorizing things that you saw from before, and you just know it's there.
Well, that was something that I liked in your notes where you were saying that they don't really have good spatial memory because they kind of just all the time know where everything is in every direction around them, whereas we can only look in one direction and have to remember what's behind us.
Right.
I just thought that was a neat little touch.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, they basically see in all directions at the same time by echolocating off of surfaces, kind of like LiDAR. Oh, and by the way, in a high-pressure ammonia environment, sound actually travels faster than here on Earth, so that sense would be heightened compared to, say, what a bat can do. So pretty much all their sensory input is through echolocation. They don't really have a sense of touch because their exoskeleton is made of rock.
In a world where there's no free oxygen in the air, that means everything's oxidized. So the outside of their body is just rock. An iridian is about just a few kilograms of actual living material in the form of like worker cells that go around and do things, building the body that you see. So while we are mostly cells with a little bit of, built tissue, dead tissue like hair, teeth, parts of our teeth, the lenses of our eyes, fingernails, stuff like that. An iridian is mostly that stuff. And with some worker cells that maintain everything.
Iridians don't really breathe like we do. They don't really have a respiration.
That's correct.
They don't really interact with the outside world at all. They're like sort of hermetically sealed.
They interact with the outside world in as much as they need to gather energy. And they're a predator.
So iridians don't breathe like we do. They're basically just a self-contained ecosystem.
It's all just ammonia. So instead of having like plants and animals and having the gases just in the atmosphere exchanged that way, each life form has to have its own back and forth system for translating carbon dioxide back and forth between. So you have like plant-like cells and animal-like cells on the inside of you. You need energy brought in to make that system go back and forth. But basically, inside Rocky's body, there are cells that take energy and carbon dioxide and make carbohydrates out of that and then return oxygen, which is then used by other cells that are more like our animal cells.
So just like you and I are made of cells, iridians are also made of cells, but their cells are kind of like a whole bunch of different species working together to transfer energy back and forth to the point that they don't even have the same genetic material.
So for you, I can take the DNA out of one of your skin cells, and if I had sufficient technology and knowledge, I could make a new Joe.
Right.
You can't do that with an iridian. If you took just the DNA out of one of their cells, all you could do is make that kind of cell.
Yeah. That's interesting. So yeah, it would be like if your eye cell and your stomach cell were like different species of cells.
Right. It's like chimera effect, but
Yeah.
on steroids.
Wow.
And so that's why an iridian is kind of, I often describe them as, it's kind of like if a beehive had legs and could move.
And while all these worker cells travel all over the body to repair and maintain and build and do their stuff, they live mostly in an area called the colony. The colony sits inside the carapace, and this is where the worker cells hang out and reproduce and repair each other. And the colony is also able to close itself off completely from the rest of the body in case of injury or infection. It's also where the body's most vital organs reside because they can be shut off and protected. Vital organs like, say, the brain. And if all of this isn't weird enough to you so far, it's about to be, because we got to talk about that brain. Because Rocky's brain is made of crystal.
And the brain is crystal.
Yeah, the crystal brain.
Yeah. Instead of like living tissue serving as neurons, it's crystals with, I'm like, yeah, f you, I don't have to define it. But it's just crystals that can reinforce, that act like neurons. Mm. But instead of neural signals, it's actually literally light. It's like, so a thought for them, a thought for us is like a neuron fires that causes other neurons to fire and they reinforce or disenforce each other. Yeah. For them, it's all within a crystal. Like a light begins, it moves around, it interferes constructively or destructively based on the arrangement of the crystalline structure inside, and that's how their brains work. And the nerves that go through their body are those thin little bits of crystal. They're basically like fiber optics that can convey the light around.
And so the crystalline brain, I imagine there's some advantages and disadvantages to that.
They just do have nearly eidetic memory. Okay. So that's why Rocky was able to just learn the words that Ryland was saying. And all you just need to tell him once. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that Iridians are very good at is math. They're very good at math just because functionally what they're doing is memorizing thousands of, they don't sit down and do it on purpose, but just over time it works out. Yeah. It's like, 6 years ago I had to figure out what 613 times 412 was, and I still remember what the answer was, And so they end up being extremely fast at math, which means they never had a real social impetus to invent adding machines. Which means they never got around to inventing computers.
Right, yeah.
So that's why computers to them are like, whoa, because there's that little hump that you have to get over. Computers can do a lot for your society, but you don't invent them at all unless you're trying to invent an adding machine to start with.
This is why Rocky was such a genius engineer. His brain is basically a computer. And I imagine they just kind of burn information into it like we do on a CD or a hard drive. Like once it's in there, it's in there for good. And if I may opine for just a second, I think this is where the book really shines, and those little like personality and cultural differences between Grace and Rocky. They have different intelligences, but they find a way to like complement each other and achieve what neither of them could do alone, all while bridging the widest cultural gaps you can imagine.
And that is why they evolved a tribe instinct in the first place.
Yeah.
And once you evolve a tribal instinct, then you start to get into the territory where you might start evolving intellect.
So again, plot points, character traits, entire cultural norms of this alien creature are all tied back to the physics of his anatomy. And the physics of his anatomy all ties back to the environmental conditions of this planet. I know I'm probably blowing smoke here, but as a writer, I'm just fascinated by this process that he has. These 16 pages of insanity that he spent God knows how much time thinking about and ruminating on, 90% of which isn't even revealed in the book or the movie, is the bedrock which he built one layer after another to ultimately form this whole story and their character arcs. This is why nerds love this book so much. Okay, a few more things to talk about here. One of the big ones is communication, how Rocky talks. And this is a big plot point in the story. Grace has to figure out how to communicate with Rocky. Now, Rocky doesn't have that much trouble understanding Grace because, again, he has this like computer brain. He just needs to hear a word one time and it's in there forever. Grace, on the other hand, needs a computer to figure out what Rocky is saying, especially because to a human, Rocky's language is just kind of like a bunch of random noises. It's a tonal language, but not just tonal, it's multitonal. So a tonal language is one where the tone of the word, or the pitch, that helps you out better, that changes the meaning of the word. So, like, if I were to say pen, and then I said pen, those would mean two different things in a tonal language. And there are actually lots of variations of tonal languages around the world, especially in Southeast Asia, but also the Navajo language is tonal. There are also several like tonal languages in Africa, and even some Scandinavian languages use pitch to kind of change the meaning of words. Even in English, the inflection of a word can change its meaning entirely. For example,
Dude. 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 Well, I guess you've got a point there.
but Rocky's language is multitonal, so he can combine different tones together to create different meanings.
Well, they have like 5 vocal cords.
Cords.
They have 2 bladders that can push air across an aperture that they can control, which can make different notes. And so they can have 5 of those going at a time, which means they can make a chord of up to 5 notes at a time.
Yeah.
And of course, they can do inflection if they want, whatever. And also, I had decided, just to add more to the alienness of it all, is that they can actually maintain context on more than one conversation at a time. So they can literally be talking to 2 people at a time. So there are ways in their language that, you can talk in an abbreviated form using just 2 or 3 of your vocals over there and over there. So there's a skill to it. And I imagined a scenario where, if I ever wrote a sequel of like Rocky talking to Adrian, maybe they're arguing in one thread and then talking about something in the other, and then this argument gets more vitriolic. Now they're arguing in both threads.
Imagine what their social media must be like. Actually, I guess it would be blissfully non-existent since they don't have computers.
They also have technology we don't have in the form of xenonite.
Xenonite is a theoretical material made from xenon that's only possible in their high temperature, high pressure environment. And it has some incredible properties that the Iridians have been able to figure out how to manipulate to create basically pretty much anything. Like, how we're always hearing about the potential of like nanofibers to create materials of incredible strength? Well, this is their version of that. And they can do all kinds of crazy things with it. Everything from Rocky's ship, named the Blip A, to the little models that he makes for Grace when they first meet. That was actually their first form of communication, was Rocky just kind of putting on a puppet show with these little models that he makes out of xenonite. Xenonite's also what allows Rocky to travel inside Grace's ship, the Hail Mary. He creates a little bubble out of xenonite that maintains its air pressure and its temperature, because obviously, if he were to enter Grace's air pressure, the water in his blood would immediately boil and he would die. Which is also kind of a little heartbreaking part of this story. They form this really beautiful connection and everything, but they can never touch each other. Like, if Grace ever shook Rocky's hand, it would probably melt Grace's hand. So anyway, xenonite has some amazing properties that made their entire space program possible.
Their planet, remember, spins around once per 6 hours, which makes it a wonderful candidate for a space elevator, because it's spinning so fast that the geostationary orbit point is very close. And when you have xenonite technology, that's the last piece of the puzzle. So they never left orbit. They weren't at the point yet where they were like trying to explore other planets in their system or anything like that. So they never discovered radiation at all.
And that's another interesting thing about Rocky and the Iridians. On one hand, they have amazing technology far beyond ours, but in others, they lag behind. Like, since they have no eyes, they're completely unaware of electromagnetic radiation, which is essentially what light is. Also, the fact that they have such a strong magnetic field on their planet. So they had to discover radiation once they got into space. And that kind of became a problem to solve, because they have no defenses against radiation.
We have all kinds of defenses against radiation. Iridians don't. And in fact, they have like metal blood, which is like the worst thing. Unlike us, they're not mostly made of water. Water is great at absorbing radiation. Rock isn't. And so, they are extremely vulnerable to radiation.
And another thing that becomes a plot point is that they don't understand relativity. So it's a cool mix of them being advanced in some ways and behind in other ways. And again, it's that cooperation between Rocky and Grace, each one kind of filling in the gaps in the other, that forms the heart of the book.